and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. It is indeed our utmost honor to welcome all of you to Syarahan Umum Citra with a very timely talk entitled An Education for the Future, a Liberal Arts and Science College in Singapore. That will be delivered by Professor Tan Yong, President of Yale-NUS College. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, I would like to invite Yang Bahagia Tan Sri VC for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good afternoon. Professor Tan Yong, President of Yale-NUS College, Singapore, and Madam Yong. Yang berbahagia Prof. Dr. Kaizi Haji Ismail, the host for this afternoon. Yang bagi Datuk Dr. Hamzah Kasim, our board member. We have Deputy Vice Chancellors and distinguished Professor Datuk Ulung, Datuk Samsul, and Datuk Syekh Muzaffar. Thank you very much for coming. And faculty members, I'm aware there are students as well, and deans, directors. There's a lot of everybody very interested, looking for your sharing this afternoon. Distinguished guests, it is our pleasure this afternoon to have Professor Tan Yong from Yale-NUS College, Singapore, to share with us on a subject which is, I believe, have a very strong interest at UKM now, organized by Pusat Citra. The word probably not that familiar to you when we talk about Citra. Probably later on someone can, or myself, can highlight that a little bit. We are honored to have you here to deliver this talk on the Education for the Future, Liberal Arts and Sciences College in Singapore. I will say that it is timely because this is historic in the sense that this semester we have the first intake of our so-called Bachelor of Science in Liberal Studies. So we have about 88, can I see hands, students here from the, okay. So these are the first batch, graduan sulung lah, insyaAllah. Welcome. If I may give just a brief background, especially to Prof and also to the rest. Way back in, I would say in 2011, 2012, we have the discussion about coming up with a new programs that will allow students to really venture into things that they love to do and what they wish to do. And among others, our concern then is that some of the programs that we have on campus start to be a bit more isolated and also separated. And of course, there are great programs, but we were thinking about how can we allow students to have more access to all the so-called scholars of the campus and also programs of the campus. A quick journey, we form a team, Prof. Khairul and the team. That guy, please, Prof. Khairul. Give a clap to Prof. Khairul for leading the team. Studying, about 30, 40 universities around the world. And of course, we cannot hide that we also look at NUS Yale, what you are doing there. From there, we carefully go through series of engagement. We talk to various group of stakeholders, civil officers, private sectors, MNCs, SMEs, parents, students, as well as faculty members, trying to dig out further what matters for today's education. And there, we generated this so-called the 6 domains that we think are very important for a student to pursue in the liberal education to have it. And we do surveys and so on. We started by introducing this component of liberal education, as we call it Citra in UKM, for all of our undergraduate programs. So we started with that component, and only this year, we started by offering a degree in liberal education. One good thing is that this initiative of ours is very much welcome by the leadership of the nation, especially at the Ministry of Higher Education before this, that we're calling for multidisciplinary, cross-discipline studies that give this kind of flexibilities to students. And we thank the ministry for allowing us to venture into something which is probably not that traditional in the context of Malaysia. But of course, having it started is great, but to assure that it is being delivered rightly and also produce the intended outcomes are probably more important now. And while we are delivering, we are learning. And today we look forward to hear from you, Prof. Tan Yong, about the experience and also things probably that you have learned, do and don'ts, just for the sake of sharing with all of us, so that we can also make sure that our programs will be delivering as intended. So again, I welcome you to UKM. I hope that this also will be a good start of us collaborating and sharing more. And I thanks to all faculty members, especially I would like to special thanks to Dr. Hamzah Kasim for a very strong supporter of liberal education on campus, as well as at the board. So we look forward for your sharing. Thank you very much, and let's have a good session. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
The time has now come to call upon Professor Tan Yong to deliver his presentation. Professor Tan Yong.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. I'm humbled and I feel a little bit scared now, because after such a big sort of introduction, I hope you will not be too disappointed with my presentation. Vice Chancellor Prof. Tan Sri Dato Sri Aslan, Board Member Dr. Hamzah Kasim, distinguished leadership of UKM, distinguished leadership of Putra Citra, friends and colleagues. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me to speak with you. It's always a pleasure to visit Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, and a special pleasure to be at your lovely campus. I also want to thank you for your very warm hospitality. Coming in was a little bit of an adventure this morning. The flight was delayed and there were other hiccups, but I'm so glad that I was so well taken care of, and colleagues were waiting patiently to receive me, and I managed to get to campus on time. So I'm delighted to be here, and what I intend to do this afternoon is to share with you my latest adventure at the National University of Singapore, and that is to lead a new liberal arts college in Singapore as the president. As was introduced, I've done various things at the National University of Singapore. I've been head of department, dean of faculty, vice provost of student life, but this has been the most interesting area of work that I've undertaken so far, because the setting up of a liberal arts college in Singapore promises great opportunities in terms of a model of education that has not, in a way, been familiar to us in Asia, but is so important as we think of the future of education and the future of how the economy is going to evolve as we look into the next 20 and 30 years, and how this model of education is going to fit into that. But also it's challenging because, as I said, it's a foreign concept in many ways, and how do you graft this foreign concept onto an Asian soil? I think that those are the kinds of challenges, and I hope to share with you my experiences working in Yale-NUS College, and then I'll be happy to take your questions, and I'm sure there must be lots of questions. So let me proceed. I should begin by giving you some context of how did it all lead to Yale-NUS. And Yale-NUS is actually the latest in a series of changes that have been happening to the Singapore university sector for the last 10 to 15 years. Now, those of you who have been following the news in Singapore will know that we have gone through quite significant changes in the higher education sector. We have similar roots. I think both the universities in Malaysia and Singapore come from the same colonial roots, and we are built on a kind of a Commonwealth model. But in the last 20 years, the Singapore university started to move away from the UK model and veering towards the US model. What did this mean? Basically, it meant some fundamental changes to the way we have done our things. So one example is promotion and tenure. When I was a junior faculty under the old system, as it were, promotion and tenure was not so much a big deal. You joined the university, after 3 years, you kept your nose clean, you don't get into trouble, you did some good work in teaching, some research, you will get tenure. But we moved away from that to make promotion and tenure a more competitive and demanding requirement. So this was the American style, where you were given a restricted contract of 6 years normally, and by the 6th year, you have to apply for promotion and tenure, and it's either up or out, as they say. In other words, if you didn't get tenure and promotion, you have to leave the university. So the stakes are very high. And what did they look for in the tenure? They look for research, they look for teaching, they look for service to a university. So the pressure on a young faculty joining a university just after the PhD to secure all those things in a space of 6 years was very high. But that was how top universities in the US maintained standards, and NUS embraced that sort of requirement in an American style. So there were external committees, external referees, external letters were sought for promotion and tenure. So that transformed NUS, NTU to some extent, in terms of driving the university into more of a research-oriented university. Then there was also the broadening of the curriculum. Like most Commonwealth universities in the past, so NUS in the past was based on very narrow specialization. So you went into one school or one faculty, like engineering or arts and social sciences or sciences, and then you did one major, and you spent most of your time studying that major, mathematics or history, and you did little else. But it became clear, I guess, about 10 years ago, that this would not do, because you cannot afford to train people very narrowly. And I think this is what UKM is actually trying to do now through this initiative, that you need to be able to broaden a young person's exposure to a range of subjects, give the person depth, yes, but the breadth is also important. So they developed what they call a T-structure curriculum. There's breadth. In other words, you have to go beyond your specialization, but you have depth as well, because you have to know and be good at what you're doing. So what did this mean? This meant that basically a student belonging to a school will have to do the majors in that school, but there would be requirements for that student to be studying a lot of things outside of that specialization of that major. So if you were an engineering student, you have to read history, sociology, economics. That was a requirement. So you cannot spend 100% of a curriculum on engineering. So there was that broadening of that requirement into a T-shaped structure. Now, as the universities progressed, now there was a period where the universities functioned very much as part of the civil service, in terms of salary structures, in terms of promotion, in terms of the agenda for growth. All these were determined by the government, by the Ministry of Education in particular. But they realized that if the university were to flourish and to compete in the world leagues and to be up there amongst the best, you have to give the universities the space to grow, the space to develop its own agenda, the autonomy to pursue its own programs. So in 2006, the government decided to make all publicly funded universities in Singapore, and I think there were only 3 at the time: National University of Singapore, Nanyang Technology University, and Singapore Management University, autonomous status. autonomous status. What did autonomous status mean? Basically what it meant is that they delink the universities from the civil service, but we had it good both ways. They will continue to fund the university. So the universities were still receiving funding from the Ministry of Education of up to 70%. So we were not, in a way, left bereft of money, but we still had funding from the Ministry of Education. But the universities now had the autonomy to develop its own program and pursue its own goals. So universities formed their own boards, governing boards, and they answered to these governing boards, and the governing boards had to then make sure that the universities spend their money wisely and achieve their standards. So we were given the freedom, the autonomy to function as independent universities, but also to make sure that while we are able to do that, the resources were given by the Ministry of Education. But of course, the plan was for the universities to raise money to be more independent. So it set the university on a path of most American universities of having the vice chancellors and the president going out to raise money for the university. And this is what NUS had to do. And as they raised money, the Ministry of Education will scale back the funding. But this was planned over a long period of time so that the university would not be short of a dollar, as it were, while it continued to develop its programs. So there was autonomy given to the university. And then, as the universities wanted to compete, they needed to be able to speak the language of international universities, which are basically research. So you need to be able to play with the big boys, as it were, and therefore research became a priority. Research became a priority. So the universities were pushing very hard, and in this day of rankings of university, research profile became very important. So a lot of resources were channeled by the universities to prime their research and basically to climb the academic ladder or the ranking ladder, as it were. But while that was happening, there was also the realization that you cannot forget teaching, you cannot forget education. The university is there for a purpose, and education is primary in the many things the university has to do. So the emphasis was on education. But because NUS and others have become autonomous, how do you develop very innovative programs that continue to build on your traditional strengths? So here was when NUS went in search of partners to do various programs. So I mentioned here a few examples. Duke NUS, there was a collaboration between NUS and Duke University to set up a graduate medical school. It's running for about, I think, 8 to 10 years now, and is doing very well. So this is a graduate medical school. I think it's similar in Malaysia. Medical education is an undergraduate degree, right? You go in straight, you study for your medical degree. But here at the Duke NUS, you do it after your first degree. So it's a graduate study program, not an undergraduate one. Then with Johns Hopkins University, they set up a conservatory of music. So it's not named after the Johns Hopkins, but it's called the Yong because of a donor. And we have a conservatory that trains very talented musicians from all over the world in Western musical tradition, but I think they're trying to now broaden to Asian as well. So we have a conservatory. And then the latest, which was established in 2011, was a collaboration between Yale University in Connecticut and NUS to set up the first liberal arts college in Singapore. So I'm now going to focus on why a liberal arts college in Singapore. Next slide, please. So first, I should make the observation that there has been a lot of interest in investing in liberal arts education in Asia for about 5-10 years now. So while Yale-NUS was established in 2011, in other parts of Asia, in India, South Korea, in Japan, China, in Malaysia, there have been interest in developing what some might call a general education model of education, or some might call a liberal education model of education, as part of the more traditional pathways in these universities. But while this was happening in Asia, what was interesting was that in the US, it was having the reverse direction. And liberal arts and sciences, liberal arts colleges are actually products of the North American tradition. But interestingly, in the last 5 years, because of a fund crunch, because of shortage of resources, people have begun questioning the utility of liberal arts colleges. Even President Obama himself said that it was better to train a plumber than to invest in someone studying art history. He later apologized for that comment. But the point is that there was some pressure on saying, why are you giving money to liberal arts college for these people to study philosophy, art history, and so on? Better to have people who are trained in vocational skills. So that trend was happening in the US. While in Asia, having now seen what you can do, the extent to which you can sort of develop through technical education, the tiger economies or the dragon economies or whatever you call them are beginning to realize that it has reached a point where the returns are diminishing, where a steep training in technical skills will only get you that far, because you have to go beyond the manufacturing economy to now go into more innovative industries. And what sort of skills do you need for that kind of industry is no longer the technical skills, but the skills of innovation, critical thinking, thinking outside of the box, and being able to connect dots and that sort of thing. So there was a realization that you had to go beyond the traditional ways of doing things, and you have to now try to create opportunities for students to come out of their limited specializations and then basically move across disciplines and draw the best from various disciplines to try to come to a more innovative approach to knowledge. So the point I'm trying to make is, while there was a kind of a decline, a loss of interest in the US, in Asia, you're seeing an interest in the liberal arts education. So what's the value, what's the relevance, you may ask? And in Singapore, of course, the government tends to think very hard about such things, and they tend to think 10 years ahead. What is it that we want to try to achieve? And I still remember sitting in a room when this idea of setting up a liberal arts college was raised. And the idea was that, we have a lot of students who are very good technically, but when it comes to the higher order thinking, they are not always at their best. So, and as society becomes more complex, you need to create a generation of young citizens who are able to move across disciplines, who are able to learn experientially and develop the kinds of emotions, the kinds of ethos, the kinds of experience that will place them well in the workplace, and also character building. Because some of the challenges that we're going to face as societies are no longer of a technical nature, but it's about how we behave in society and the kinds of society we want to build. So we want to build, the idea was to see whether we can create a model of education that would build an intellectual community for a globalized and connected world. Because this is the reality now. A graduate from the National University is not likely to just be working in Singapore, and is not likely to be working in a team that comprises people who are similar to himself or herself, right? You are likely to be working in a cross-cultural team. You are likely to be working across regions. You are likely to be dealing with challenges that may not even exist while you were in school. So how do you create that openness, that connectivity, that ability to adapt to changing circumstances that are going to now happen thick and fast? So the idea then, as I said, discussed in a room, was maybe Singapore should experiment with a liberal arts college. And liberal arts college, by definition, cannot be large. So you don't build another big university and call it a liberal arts university, but you build a small and you experiment with it and create that as an opportunity for students who are so inclined to go through that pathway, as it were. And I remember there were lots of debates. How do we do it? Do we build one by ourselves in Singapore? Do we invite someone from outside like New York and set up another school in Singapore like they did in Shanghai and Abu Dhabi, and NYU Abu Dhabi, NYU Shanghai? Or do you find a partner and try to create something that's new? But what was very clear to us in Singapore and to the Singapore government was that we did not want a satellite campus in Singapore. We did not want just to take something out of the North American concept and let's plant it and then have a duplicate in Singapore, because that's not going to work. So what we were very keen on was, how do we draw the best practices from an established school, those who have been doing this very successfully for many, many years, and then adapt it to Singapore so that it serves our purposes as well. So as chance would have it, the president of NUS met with the president of Yale University in Davos, the World Economic Forum. They got to talking, and Yale at that time was also looking for an opportunity to export their brand of liberal arts education outside of America into Asia, and they decided to partner with NUS. So we came together, NUS and Yale, to build up the first liberal arts college in Singapore. So what we wanted to do with this college was to ensure that we didn't want to just replicate what was done anywhere else in NUS or NTU, but we wanted a curriculum that would make students better informed citizens and able to develop critical reasoning skills. So those were the objectives. Those were the objectives. Those things would inform the way we would frame our curriculum, the way we would organize the college. We wanted to prepare students for a globalized and interconnected world, and a multicultural world, and be able to contribute at the same time to economy and society. Now, this is a very important point because, as I said earlier, we are expecting our students to be globalized citizens. In other words, very comfortable to function in all sorts of environments and being very adaptable as well. And it's very important that they also understand that they are not just dilettantes who appreciate the fine arts and appreciate fine music and dabble in philosophy, but they have a mission to contribute to society and economy in very substantive ways. And we wanted to also nurture the intellect and the building of character is very important, because you must know yourself, you must examine yourself, and basically ask how you can be a better person, and how then, through being a better person, you can contribute to society at large. So these were the reasons, and these were the reasons why liberal arts colleges existed in the first place. One, to make someone a better citizen, able to debate, discourse, argue, but with reason and with information, and not just empty rhetoric or vitriol or anger, and be able to strike compromises, because societies are going to be faced with very complex issues, and the ability to do that makes you a better citizen. Two, how to contribute to the economy, to society. Three, how to function in a multicultural world. And four, how to make yourself a better person. So those were the kinds of broad objectives we tried to bring into the Liberal Arts College. So we were established in 2011, I said, but in 2013 we took in our first batch of students. Our mission, I'll just show you the next slide.
Next slide.
Yeah. Was a vision, and this was crafted very carefully because this informs the way we function as a college, and I make sure that all our students remember those three lines. First, we are a community of learning, founded by two great universities in Asia for the world. The community of learning is a very important consideration for us because it says that we all learn together. We all learn together. And through community and through conversation, we improve ourselves and we make ourselves better people. So this is not a very didactic approach where we stand in front of a classroom and then I tell you what to learn and you learn in a very old-fashioned style. But this is about mutual learning. And this is important, bear in mind, because as I will show you later, it even informs the way we plan the physical spaces in the college. Yeah. Now, in Asia for the world is important because, as I said earlier, we didn't want a duplicate of Yale in NUS. And I make it very clear each time I speak to visitors that we are not a mini Yale. We are not a mini Yale. Because Yale was set up 300 years ago, and it evolved, influenced by the context of Connecticut, of America. it cannot be the same for us in Asia. So if we wanted a college that would work for Singaporeans, Asian students in Asia, then we must think it differently. But at the same time, we are not going to look inwards, just to Asia itself. We must prepare our students for the world. So in Asia, for the world. And that's why we frame Yale-NUS as a fully residential college, which aims to redefine liberal arts and sciences. Redefine meaning we're not going to copy, but we're going to reinvent and try to find the best ways of doing it for ourselves and make sure that our students can operate in a complex and interconnected world. Next slide, please. So this is the physical environment that we have. The campus was built on a golf course. Well, the golf course was given to NUS in 2008. We built a large part of residential colleges, of which Yale was not a part. There was a 4-hectare piece of land that was reserved, and Yale-NUS took up that piece of land. So you notice the land is a bit undulating. That's because it's a golf course. But we wanted to create a kind of a conducive learning environment for our students. Next slide, please. So what did our curriculum look like? So in the spirit of liberal arts learning, most of our classes were organized along small discussion group seminar style. This is where people can sit in one room, and I was telling one of our colleagues here that maximum class size was about 16. And of course, people salivate when I say that, because it's a great luxury to be teaching in classes of 16. But that allows you the Socratic method of learning, where you can push ideas back and forth. We all read a book together, and we come and we bend the ideas around, and that's what we were trying to do. All right? But of course, there's a cost to all this, and I'll talk about that a bit later. It's not cheap, It's not cheap. Yeah. Then we wanted to build community. And you build community through an integrated residential program. So Yale-NUS is a 4-year residential program. The students have no choice. They have to stay in college for 4 years. All right. So we built a college to make sure that we can house at any one time 1,000 students, because that's our plan. Each cohort is 250 students, so they stay for 4 years. So at steady state, we have 1,000 students. So we are able to house 1,000 students, and it's a 4-year residential program. But beyond the classroom, beyond the formal curriculum, residential life is one big part of the Yale-NUS experience. The other big part is experiential learning. So we have internships. We have this very unique program called Week 7. Now what happens at Week 7? In the freshman year, the first year, in the 7th week of the first semester, the students all leave the classroom, and they take up a project that's developed by a faculty, and this is all voluntary by the faculty. And they try to link what they learn from the classroom to this project. So it could be about apartheid in South Africa. It could be about waste management in Southeast Asia. It could be about food culture in some part of the world, etc., etc. And they go out of the classroom. And they spend 1 week doing that. It's graded. I think we give them 2 credits for it. And then basically, after 1 week, they come back, they write reports, and they make a presentation. So this is to integrate experiential learning into the classroom learning. We call this learning across borders. LABS, learning across borders. And while Week 7 happens to everybody, it's compulsory, sometimes faculty offer other learning across borders, LABs, courses throughout the 4 years, so students have an opportunity. So this is the way we organize. First, small classroom discussion. 2, residential, and 3, experiential. Now, this is how our curriculum is structured. Those of you who are very familiar with very traditional Commonwealth type curriculum will notice that this is the inverse of what we are used to, right? In a typical, say, British, Scottish, Australian university, you'll find that the majors account for 70 or 75% of the curriculum. Here's the reverse. The majors account for only 33%, 1/3 of the curriculum. The other 2/3 are taken up by the common curriculum and electives. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the common curriculum. The common curriculum is this compulsory, foundational, if you want, a foundational course that all students must take. Now, if you look at a lot of universities, they have this core or common curriculum or whatever they call it, but it is organized on the distribution model, which means that what the university or the college tells you is that, okay, you have to do 2 courses in sciences, 2 courses in humanities, 2 courses in social sciences, you go and take it. And then they will find the departments which offer them a basket of modules, and then they will pick. Now, we didn't like that model because we find that the students will veer towards their own interests, right? So they, as much as possible, if I am interested in sciences, I will try to take as many science modules as possible, or those as close to my interest as possible, without opening up, without forcing myself out of my comfort zone. So we decided we will design the common curriculum. In other words, the common curriculum will be a prescribed course for every student. It will be common because everybody has to do the same thing and everybody studies together. We mix up the classes. They have to sit with students from the different colleges or residential colleges in different backgrounds, but they study together. And they do it for 3 semesters, so 1.5 years. So what do we teach in a common curriculum? Multidisciplinary type of thing, literature and humanities, philosophy, political thought, quantitative reasoning, comparative social inquiry, scientific inquiry, modern social thought, and historical immersion. Now, another interesting aspect of the common curriculum is that all these courses are team taught. They're team taught. They're taught by teams of 4 or 5 faculty. Now, this runs against the instincts of most of us who were trained doing our PhDs in one subject, right? So when we recruit them into Yale-NUS, we make it very clear. You have to teach in a common curriculum, and you have to teach outside of your own specialization. So in literature and humanities, for instance, it will comprise of a literature professor, a historian, a philosopher, and sometimes even someone from the social sciences who will have to try to bring together these things. And it's team taught, no choice. And the reason why we wanted to do that was the example must be shown from the faculty. If you are talking multidisciplinary and a faculty are operating in their own little areas, how can you then convince your students that multidisciplinary education is important? So we have no departments in Yale-NUS. We have no departments. We are organized into 3 divisions: social sciences, humanities, and sciences, and they're all mixed up. And we don't have physical spaces that only house the scientists or the social scientists. They're all mixed up. We have what we call office suites. In other words, it's a kind of a common area where you have 5 or 6 offices. And we make it a point that in these suites, they're all mixed up. So you will have a music professor sitting next to a life science professor, sitting next to a philosopher. So when a student walks into the suite, instantly he or she can see that this is actually a mixed, multidisciplinary environment. So the common curriculum really emphasizes that. And the way we organize our divisions and the way we organize our spaces also emphasize that. So when a student comes in for 1.5 years, they get that into their system already. They're not thinking of the majors. They may have an interest, but they can't do it as yet. Next slide, please. So, as I said earlier, we didn't want to just replicate an American institution in Singapore. So the students, while doing their common curriculum, will have to read across cultures. So if you were studying in Chicago or the West, you are likely to just read Machiavelli or Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War. But here, the students have to read Confucius alongside this, or the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi, or the Ramayana alongside the Odyssey. So it's very demanding, but they have no choice but to do that. But some of our students now are even telling us that this is not diverse enough. They want Sejarah Melayu in the mix. And I think that's a great idea. So I think this diversity is going to be very important. And while this common curriculum was framed 5 years ago, I think it's time for reform, and we may even add to the diversity by bringing in more Southeast Asian philosophy and traditions and classics into the mix. So this is what we mean by a kind of adaptation of a model into Asian context. Right. Then after 1.5 years, the students start doing their electives. Now, the reason why we want electives is also we want students to explore. So beyond the common curriculum, they don't jump straight into a specialization, they start to open up. But then, by the 3rd year or so, they have to do a major. So we offer 14 majors, and you can see that some of them are even quite multidisciplinary, right? Like PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics. That's the Oxford kind of thing that we have. And then we have environmental studies, which is also quite multidisciplinary, urban studies, and so on. So it's not a traditional single subject kind of major that we offer. And it's very interesting how students make their choices, because when they come in, we ask them to indicate, what are you likely to major in? And they'll indicate something, they have a thought. But then when we actually see that, when we see the list of their declared majors after that, there is no correlation. They change their minds. And here is where opening up their minds through the common curriculum, through the electives, allows students to find their own passions. At 18 years old, they'll come in and tell you, I want to be a history major, I want to be a physics major, I want to do mathematics only, and so on and so forth. And you see how they change their minds after they get exposed to this broad range of possibilities that are offered to them. I was telling colleagues earlier that I'd like to tell the story of an Indian student that we had who came in saying that he wants to do literature, and he was an accomplished writer already when he came in, but he ended up doing astrophysics and is now pursuing his PhD in astrophysics in Harvard. So you can see that it's a dramatic change. But if you organize your curriculum well, these things become possible. And the students take the electives and then they switch around and they find that actually I have the capability to move from the humanities to the social sciences to the sciences. And that's why it's important that you have that breadth and openness, because that is how the real world is going to operate, and they must know how to adapt to changing circumstances. So we try to achieve that in our curriculum. Next slide, please. Right. Conversations in community. I talked about the spatial organization. This is one of our dining halls. Now, we took a lot of pains to organize our dining halls and invest some resources because we wanted students to treat the dining halls as a space of learning. They mustn't go in and say, this is where I get my food, I eat, I go. But we wanted to make it conducive. So when they go in, they have an opportunity to not only talk amongst the peers, they talk to faculty as well. And we give incentives to faculty by giving them free meals so that they can go in and they can eat with our students. Yeah. So this is part of the requirement. So if you want to carry out a discussion outside of your classroom, go to the dining hall. As president of the college, I usually have meetings at breakfast with my students. They will write to me and say, President, we want to have something to discuss with you. Can you meet us at 8 a.m. tomorrow at the dining hall? I say, okay, sure, I have to have breakfast. I live in college. So I sit down there, I take my breakfast, I sit down with them, and we have a discussion. And I think it's a great way to build community, number one. It's a great way also of lowering boundaries between the administration and the students. And the students also learn how to be responsible because they know that when they go in there, they don't want to waste their time. They must know how to conduct themselves in a discussion over food. So those are all part of our learning experience. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I talked about experiential learning. I already explained learning across borders and faculty-led interdisciplinary programs. And then they also learn problems in a real-world setting. So they study all these things in textbooks, right? Philosophy, all these problems and all these theoretical issues. But then how do you apply it when you go down to the real world? So a lot of opportunities for that. And community engagement, because we feel that, as I said, character is very important. Because this is a very privileged existence. They must realize that they are so fortunate to be in there, and they must pay back. There must be a certain degree of gratitude. So we want them to go out there, and a lot of our students do that. They are fighting all sorts of causes, fossil fuel, environment, pollution, save this and save that. Never a dull moment in the college. They are always out there trying to advocate for some causes. And this is a performance hall. Now, we also wanted a place where students can do their performances, have their lectures, and really feel proud that they belong to a very beautiful environment. And this place is always used because we have lectures, we have performances by the students. So it's to promote a very holistic kind of cultural life with the students. All right, I told you all the good things about the college, but let me tell you a few problems. Tell you a few problems that we face. Yeah. First, employability. Now, okay, not all of them are problems, but employability was one of our first concerns, because liberal arts is a new concept in Asia, in Singapore, and I'm sure if you were to introduce one here, you're going to have similar kinds of concerns. Parents would ask, fees are not cheap. I would rather, and my child is very bright, obviously can get to your college, but also can get into medicine or law or engineering. Why should he or she go to your college, have a liberal arts degree that looks like it's neither here nor there? Will he or she be able to find a job? So we were quite worried about that at first. Now we've graduated 2 batches in 2017 and 2018. So we were watching this group very closely. But I feel quite happy and validated now that basically these people are able to find employment quite easily because of the way in which they have been trained. They are very articulate, they write well, they speak well, they're able to connect the dots, they are bold, and they also are prepared to do different things. So we found that the students who graduated have gone into a range of industries: consulting, finance, banking. Many of them go to graduate studies, in civil service, art sector, social entrepreneurship, and so on and so forth. So it's a range. Our first batch, within 6 months, the Ministry of Education does a survey. 96% found employment within 6 months, very easily. 96%. So you may ask me, what happened to the 4%? Were they not employable? Actually, no, it's not. They chose not to. So one student who was very bright, he decided to make his album. He wanted to record his first rap album. He's a Malay Muslim boy, by the way. He wanted to make his first rap album. And he succeeded. He took a year off to make a rap album. And now his rap album, I'm told, is now on Spotify. And Warner Brothers has given him a contract to do the next album, pursuing his own passion. Not in a well-trodden road, but pursuing his own passion. Another has volunteered to work in a fish farm. He drives a truck and all this because he wanted to experience the industry. But that's the kind of students we produce, right? Now, second class, 2018, just graduated in May this year. As of maybe last week when I was talking to my colleagues, about 80% of them have already found jobs. Some of them are still traveling, they're finding themselves, they want to go and discover the world first, that's fine. But I guess the point I'm making is that there is always that concern in an Asian context that the liberal arts trains you for neither this nor that. But actually, they do. And what I'm told by my colleagues in North America is that you've got to track them long term. The median salary, they didn't start off too badly. The median salary is quite competitive. But usually in a liberal arts setting, 10 years after they graduate, they will overtake their peers in terms of salary, because these are the people who will then become leaders. They'll become, they do startups and they'll be successful. And they are the types that are innovative and they'll do things very differently. So I think it's worthwhile investing in a liberal arts education. Second challenge is academic freedom. Now, if you are going to promote a liberal arts education, you must allow a lot of discussion in the classroom. We were criticized heavily when our doors opened in 2013 by people from New Haven, Yale, because they said that Singapore is an authoritarian country. There's no freedom in Singapore. How can you set up a liberal arts college bearing the Yale name in a country that controls its media so tightly, bans chewing gum, etc., etc.? What sort of society is this? So there were a lot of criticism. So this was something that they were concerned about. But we were assured that in the college there will be academic freedom, but of course subject to the laws of the land. So in the college, our students debate everything, political, social, cultural issues, and sometimes they do push close to the boundaries. And here is where the leadership has to guide them. And we have to tell them, you can debate these things in the spirit of learning, But if you are out to try to pull somebody down or to harm somebody, I think that cannot be tolerated. So my policy is very simple. You can do anything you want in the college as long as you don't break the law, you cause nobody any harm, and you don't generate an environment of hostility. In other words, if you are calling another group some names and you say, I can't stand your face, get out of my face, I will not tolerate that. But other than that, have a healthy discussion. That's okay. So that kind of mutual respect has to be kept. And it's not easy in a context that you and I are familiar with, but this is where we do trial and error. And finally, finances. As I said earlier, liberal arts colleges are expensive proposition. The cost of the fees is 3 times that of a normal school in NUS. So in Yale-NUS, a Singapore student, subsidized, pays about $30,000 a year in fees, Singapore dollars, 30,000, subsidized. And that's because he has to live in college, room and board. A non-subsidized student, an international student, will pay something like 70,000 a year for fees and all. So it's not cheap. But if you want to keep your class to 16, you want to have that kind of environment, that's what you need to do. So as president of the college, I spend most of my time going out to beg for money. An endowment. I have to build an endowment because this is the way in which you can then try to sustain your programs in a long way. So these are the challenges for our college. I think I'll end here because I've already overshot my time, but I would like to leave some time for question and answer. So this is a very brief introduction. Those of you who are interested, Singapore is not that far away. If you want to come and visit, I'll be very happy to host you at the college, and I'll be very happy to take your questions. And I hope I've given you a flavor of what Yale-NUS is. Maybe through your questions we can elaborate further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tan, for a very informative lecture. I now open the session for questions. It would be helpful if you state your name and faculty before you direct your question to Professor Tan. Questions, please.
My name is Shamsul from Institute of Ethnic Studies, UKM. I think I'm very interested in academic stuff. Because a student is one group of people who are not sure who they are, what they are. And yet you have to have a certain parameters for the quality of academic staff you have to have. And I believe they are not all liberal education educated. So how do you find this meeting place between academics who are not educated in liberal education to actually deliver liberal education?
Right. Yeah.
Because I think these are the challenges that I imagine UKM has to face.
Yeah.
What more with staff who are already here?
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to yours, you can select from.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And for me, because the quality is also about academic staff quality.
Yeah.
Number two, facilities. You really invest money to have a first-class hall for orchestra.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about UKM now. And
Actually, you can say.
Singapore
No, it's okay.
being,
Okay.
being at the hub of Southeast Asia in the context of modernity and economics, I think that has achieved a certain level of quality of life that is already expected by the students. So how do you leverage between the society's demand quality of life and your building and your beautiful dining hall? It reminds me of my Mesti Malaya dining hall. So, because it has to be now, here and now. It's normal in the past, it's normal historical, it's here and now and we're moving forward. So, how do you come and manage all this, especially academic staff and all facilities and expectations? Thank you very much.
So, on academic staff, I guess we were fortunate because we did not have to depend on NUS or Yale for faculty. So when we first started, so let me explain a little bit about the status of Yale-NUS in NUS. We are what we call a highly autonomous school within the university. So we are given full autonomy to run like almost an independent college. That's why I carry the title of a president. And there are only two presidents in NUS, the president of NUS and me. So in a sense, it's a recognition that there is a certain status to Yale. So they don't interfere. We get our money directly from the Ministry of Education. It doesn't flow through NUS. I mean, NUS helps us manage it through their finance structures, but the budget is reserved for Yale, so it's not shared with the other faculty. We have our own endowment. We build our own endowment, and I have my own governing board that governs Yale-NUS. And basically, we recruit our own students and we recruit our faculty. So when we started in 2011, I remember I was involved first as a chair of a search committee. So we were looking around the world to hire, and that was the question we asked. We are not recruiting you to a typical university. This is a liberal arts university where you have to do team teaching, you have to cross boundaries, you don't belong to a department. Are you comfortable with it? Come only if you are comfortable. So that was the demand that we set from the word go. We did lose a few along the way. People say, oh, I came here, I wanted to do this and that. For instance, I want to do research, but my basic requirement is that you have to teach first. Two teaching load, two courses per semester. Even if you are a big professor, you have to do the same as an assistant professor. No special treatment. Because this is what the college is about. It's about how you convey education and learning to the students. So why should I treat you differently? So that's a requirement. So come in with your eyes open. If you think that this is what you're able to do, by all means. And actually the people who choose to join Yale-NUS have that passion. They have that passion. They want to engage students, but they are also very good researchers. Now, in big universities like UKM, you are used to having graduate students who help you research. But what we do is you try to cultivate undergraduates, and they are so talented, these people. If you choose them well, they're so talented. Some of them can actually co-publish papers with their professors. They're that good. So this is how we try to make sure that the people who come in, there's no misfit. But it's harder to do it with established universities because if 70% of your staff are already here, getting them to change may not be easy. So that's why NUS decided to set up a new school rather than to transform, say, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences into that, because that would take a long time. You got to start from a clean slate and allow us to hire. So I have 120 faculty now, and everybody is hired fresh. They belong to Yale-NUS. At the same time, I draw on the resources of Yale and NUS by bringing in visiting professors. They come in to teach one semester, one term, and then they go back. That's fine. But I enrich the environment by doing that. So I have my core staff, and then I draw the additional strength coming in. So that's how we did it. So I guess what I'm saying is that you probably need to build something totally new if you want that kind of culture. Otherwise, with inherited culture, you'll be constrained. Facilities, you don't realize how competitive this thing can be because we are trying to attract some of the best students in the world. Each year we have 8,000 students applying for 250 places. So the competition is very high. So the students whom you choose have many choices. They can get into medical school, they can get into the top, they can get to Harvard, they can get to Yale. Why would they come to Singapore? They won't come to Singapore to come to a kind of a second-rate school with lousy infrastructure. So that's our competitor, you see. So we have to be mindful of that. Costs a lot of money, but it's worth investing because when the students come, we have this exercise called Experience Yale-NUS Weekend. So after we select the students, right, we offer a larger group of students because we know that these students will have choices and then they'll be making the choices. Then they will decide whether to accept our offer or not. We bring them in for a weekend. They have not accepted yet. We have offered them a place. They have not accepted yet. They come with their parents. We pay for the students if they are from overseas to come in, but we don't pay for the parents. Sometimes parents tag along. We give them 1 weekend of experience, a normal class, dining experience, sleeping in a suite and all that sort of thing. Then they make a choice, and it works. Because when they come and they see this place, they say, hey, this is actually a very nice place. I like the environment, I like the people, I like the faculty, food's not so bad, etc., etc. They make their choice. Parents come and say, actually, especially those from America, because many of them have not been to Asia. Then they come and say, actually, Singapore not so bad, huh? Because they only read about newspaper, no chewing gum, caning, everything. They say, this must be a barbaric place. But then when they come and they say, actually, quite thriving this place, and they feel safe to have their children here. So this is how they influence. So
physical infrastructure is very important. So I guess my advice, and of course I don't want to speak out of place here because I understand constraints of all institutions, is it's worthwhile investing in good infrastructure because the dividends will pay itself in a sense. It's really worth it because that's how you play in the big league now, because top students have choices, top faculty have choices. I mean, if I could just stray a little bit, NUS, when we were recruiting top faculty, not easy, because they say, why should I come to NUS? I've got my labs in whichever university I am, I've got my research environment, I've got research grants. So unfortunately, it's like arms race. You have to go in and bid, and that's how you become competitive. Sadly, it's about resources, in my view. But after a while, hopefully, reputation helps as well.
I call for more questions.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Siti Dimoshiki. I'm from Sarjana Muda Citra. I have a few questions for Professor Tan. My first question is, how does the common curriculum can shape students to perform in the industry, especially for Industrial Revolution 4.0? My next question, how does the NUS prepare the liberal arts students for globalization? And for the third question is, as Professor Tan has mentioned before, students in liberal arts, when they go out, professor wants them to be in a cross-cultured team. Like for example, Malaysia with France, London, everything. So I want to know, how does that can make them contribute to Malaysia too, like to their own country also? Because they're in a cross-cultured team, they're mixed up in everything, but at the same time they want to contribute something to their own country. So yeah, that's all.
Okay, so you have three questions for me. The common curriculum and maybe the general Yale-NUS curriculum and how it addresses the challenges posed by Industrial Revolution 4.0, right? I think all the more the need for this sort of a broad-based education, because if machines are going to take over humans, then of course they'll be performing functions that traditionally used to be performed by humans, right? So we need to go away from the kind of training that can be done by machines, and that is judgment, innovation, creative thinking. So all the more reason, I think you need to have that kind of education that encourages people to really be very different and be very innovative. Because if your job is very repetitive, if your training is for a function that can be done by a machine, then you'll be obsolete very fast. But the problems of the world cannot just be solved by AI and all this, in my view. They are very complex issues in all spheres, not just technology, politics and culture, that needs judgment. And this is where I think a well-trained person who's able to think critically, articulate a well-argued position, see different perspectives, connect different dots, I think it's going to come out quite well. So that's what we are trying to achieve through our curriculum. Two, preparing for globalization. I think this whole idea of, first, a multicultural, diverse environment where you have to encounter on a daily basis people from different backgrounds. I have students from Paraguay, from Mongolia, from Sri Lanka, from Africa, and so on. Now, this teaches you, in a way, cultural or intercultural ethos. Of course, that is just day-to-day living. Then we do all sorts of programs like Learning Across Borders, where we take them out, and our students are amongst the most traveled students in anywhere you can find. 70% of each cohort goes on study abroad. They spend one term outside Singapore. In a class of 17, I came across a very interesting statistic. In the entire class of 4 years, there was only one student who never left Singapore. One. And I was very curious, why this student never left Singapore? The rest have traveled 3, 4, 5 times. So there are lots of opportunities for them to travel and learn globally. So that's how we encourage them and learn how to function in a globalized world. Cross-cultural team, I think the point is not so much of working with different people. The point is, how do you develop understanding, empathy, an ethos of being open to different views. And I think that's going to be useful whether you work in a cross-cultural team or not. But the point is that when you are faced with a problem, you then realize that it is not just your perspective that matters, that there are so many other perspectives that you have to take into consideration, and they are very complex ones. So what are the challenges facing Malaysia now? I don't know, social inequality, which is a big problem in Singapore, inter-ethnic relations, growth, social mobility. But these are things that are not easy to solve just through a formula, right? You need empathy, you need understanding. You need to understand the complexities of different people and see problems from their point of view as well. And that's why I mean this ability to step out of yourself sometimes and the character to understand how examining yourself and examining the problem in its full complexity is going to be such an important attribute. And I think these people, if they have these attributes, they're going to function well, and they're going to be leaders because they can understand how to find solutions that may work. And it's not very mechanical, but they will be able to find things that, in a way, can address the complexities of the problem. That's what I was trying to get at, in a sense.
Thank you, Professor Mazuki. Just to ask you this problem question, I know that you're very cautious, you start with very small numbers of students because of constrained resource, and then you're not sure about, affordability. Do you think in future, it will remain sort of this liberal art will become mainstream, or the conventional become the minority, or it will remain as it is in future, liberal art will stay as, I would say, just for a niche group of people?
So,
Can I just add one
Sure.
question? In Malaysia, we have a lot of vacancies of jobs which cannot be filled because these are high-level jobs for young graduates who fail in their test for structured thinking, mainly in the consulting industry, which I'm in. Do you think do Singapore have the same problem with the high-end jobs for structured thinking and problem solving are not able to fill because they are not brought very much Anglo-Saxon model of education, not American?
Okay, so let me answer the question about scaling. I think at this point in time, given what we are trying to achieve, community, conversation, dining, small classes, we are constrained by the cost of enlarging it. So for instance, if I want to take in 500 students, I have to build another block of residences, and this don't catch it, then hire more faculty. So the plan, there are some liberal arts colleges that operate about 1,006 to 2,000. That looked like a size that is manageable. We are currently at 1,000, so there's some thinking about whether we should enlarge, but given our current resources, there isn't. But it cannot go much beyond that, because then it becomes a big university. Then all the intimacy, the kinds of programs that you need to run that requires small scale will be lost. Oh, I see. Yeah. The demand, I suspect, will go up. So it will become more competitive, in my view. But what I'm seeing is that other places are adapting. So just 2 days ago, I got news that the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences have introduced a PPE program, Philosophy, Political Economy program, because they know that that's a kind of program that will attract students. So in their own ways, they're adapting, but they cannot go the full length of introducing the kind of residential program that we have because of skills. So you're going to see different types of competition. Now in NUS, there are also residential colleges that are run quite similar to Yale-NUS, but again, for only 2 years instead of 4 years. So there will be different types. So the way I see it is Yale-NUS offers one pathway, which may cater to a small sliver of students, but other parts of the university may adapt to compete for students and offer that breadth that I'm talking about. And you'll see evolution happening. And I think an outfit like Putra Citra is probably an example of adaptation as well, right? How do you try to introduce general education to a much bigger scale? And that's always been a problem. So my offer to the president of NUS, who's a good friend of mine, is this: see, treat Yale-NUS as a special zone because we are small. We can try funny things. If it doesn't work, just say those crazy guys don't know what they're doing, it doesn't work. But if it works, you can adapt it into NUS and scale it up. And that's my value proposition to the college, so to the larger university. So I think that's one way of thinking about it. But currently, I guess my direct answer to your question is that we cannot scale up because of all these constraints. But we want to experiment with interesting ideas. Either we scale it up ourselves or let NUS do the scaling. On this idea of top positions requiring structured thinking, in Singapore, because it's quite an open economy, I think these positions are quite quickly filled. If not by local students, then by international people. As I said, 50% of our students from the college are international students. So there's one intricate part which I need to explain. When they come, they can apply for what they call tuition grant, which means that they enjoy some subsidy from the Singapore government, and in return, they have to work in Singapore for 3 years. 3 years. So we pay some of a little bit, they work for 3 years. This is an idea of retaining some talent. So these people are the people who will then get jobs in the consultancy companies and all this alongside Singaporeans. So in fact, the top jobs are quite competitive, not easy to get because the talents are there. But some of you are millennials here. One of the things that I've observed is that people are now changing jobs so regularly, so much more regularly. The first class that graduated in 2017, I already heard three of my students have changed jobs already after 1 year. So they are quite mobile. They are very mobile. And the value that I hope that we have brought to them is that we have taught them to learn how to learn, which means that whatever they go, they know how to reinvent themselves. Whenever whatever they're doing is losing out or fading into obsolescence or not exciting them anymore, they can reinvent themselves very quickly. And that's the kind of mental dexterity and attitude which I want in our students. And hopefully, still early days. If you invite me 8 years from now, I'll come back 10 years, I can tell you. I have some longitudinal data to share with you. But right now, based on 2 years, it's looking promising. That's all I'll say. It's looking promising, but we'll see how they pan out 10 years down the road. Thank you very much.